listeners. Over the last several episodes, we've had the opportunity to get to know a lot of amazing folks in the higher education and leadership fields. Now, in this special holiday weekend episode, we'll take a moment to pause and peek into the personalities and quirks of your hosts, Kelsey and Loren. They pose some hard questions to each other and ponder their own strengths, preferences, and perceived weaknesses. Sit back, relax, and enjoy this special edition of Campus Confidential: Secrets to Higher Education Leadership.
I say with the word fear a lot. I've had people tell me, you're fearless. It's like, well, let's back up. I have a crap ton of fear inside of me. Mm-hmm. Now, how I show up and my choice to move through that fear is the way I live my life and what I choose to do. But I hold a whole lot of fear.
Is it even possible to lead without fear? Isn't fear the thing that accompanies leadership? I mean, is it possible to even be in a role that fear isn't going to make its way into your? If you're really leading with humility and with compassion and with courage and vulnerability, I mean, is it possible? I'm not sure it is. I've had to come to grips with that too. I'm afraid most of the time when I'm in leadership roles.
Right.
Am I going to get this right? Am I right about what I think? Will people follow? What if I am wrong about my assumptions?
Yeah. What you said, am I going to get this right, just rings so true inside of my head of there's actually no right or wrong is one thing that I've really sat with over the years. It's how do you hold space for whatever needs to come and move forward? I think when we get caught in this right or wrong, am I doing this right? That's when we kind of, at least for me, have gotten in my own way. If I'm trying to be right versus, hey, this is just the space that needs to be held and I'll hold the space. You know, maybe there's some leaders that don't have fear, but I would even say, even if you're the type of leader that's a dictator, we go down that road, because I think what you listed out is an ideal leader, at least in my mind, characteristics of someone I want to work with, for, around. But there's plenty of leaders that don't hold those characteristics as priorities. And I would say they're even more fearful of leaders because they don't know how to be and hold space and be in power with versus power over. So fear for everyone. A cup of fear for everybody.
Well, you're acknowledging, I remember when I worked at the University of Michigan, I implemented a fairly large reorganization, lots of people in multiple departments affected by this reorganization. And I spent probably, it was probably close to 2 years sort of really thinking about this reorganization. And I went to visit people, different folks in similar roles at various institutions that I held in some regard. And I remember one individual in particular, we went to lunch and I asked him about the reorganization he had implemented, which to me looked to be wildly successful, at least from the outside. I'm sure there were all kinds of things that kind of go on, right, internally. And I said, yeah, thanks. This is so helpful. Thank you. I have to think about what I'm going to do. And he said, you already know what you're going to do. You're just afraid to do it. And he was right. I was totally afraid of the responsibility to execute, which was it was going to be visible. It was going to impact lots and lots of people. I had been studying this kind of thing. And then I remember after that telling that story to my boss at the time. And I said, I'm afraid to get it wrong. I'm afraid to be wrong. And she said, it's impossible. I said, what do you mean it's impossible? She said, you have studied this so much. You have thought about this so much. It may change. What you're going to do might be different, and it might not go exactly as you thought, but you have spent enough energy on this that it's the right thing to do. So it was a more supervisory way to tell me what this other guy had said, which is, you already know what you're going to do. You're just afraid to do it. So that was my wrestling with fear. And what I found was I just admitted to the staff, I'm a little bit nervous about this.
Did you feel better after you did that?
I did. Yeah, it was very honest. I mean, I felt like I didn't have to front as much. And it allowed them to be as knowledgeable and expert at at the changes that we need to make as I felt in a role I needed to be. And I really didn't know any more than they did. I just had the job, So yeah, I did feel better about that, actually, quite a bit. There was a quote I put up too. I remember doing a presentation, and the quote was, I think it goes something like, I fear more what is within than what is without. In other words, it's more inside me. What I fear is inside me more than what's the externality. And I did feel better. It was just an admission.
Yeah.
So,
what have you changed or done differently, or have you done anything differently since that experience with change or with things you needed to implement?
Well, two things maybe. When I implemented that, I had never heard of the book called Transitions, and the organizational development consultant that was working with me recommended this book. It's by a guy named William Bridges. Apparently, the organizational development consultants know about this book. I didn't know about it. And he talks about in this book how people don't fear the change. Change is a decision, or it's an event, or it's a date on the calendar. It's the transition that comes after that is so hard on people. So moving to a new town, as you've recently done, yes, it's got its challenges, but it's finding a new doctor, learning the roads, finding new friends. It's all of that stuff that comes after. So what I learned from that was to attend to not only the courage to make the decision, but all the stuff that comes after, both within me going through and then for everybody else. And everybody's in a different point in that. And if he maps this transition cycle, and it looks a little bit like the grief cycle. So I learned to sort of pay attention to endings and beginnings differently. There are endings to things when you create change, just as much as there are new beginnings. And if you focus just on the new beginnings, you're not attending to the endings that people are having, experiencing, or where they're at on that journey a little bit. So that's one thing I learned. The other thing I think I learned is that being honest and a little vulnerable is liberating for me and for the people that I'm responsible for. Yeah, I guess that's probably the best way to say it. It by just naming it, just name it right up front is just liberating. It allows everybody to be a little bit afraid, and we're going to do this together. So I don't know that I'm not an expert at change management, but I learned a lot from that, and it worked. Actually, the change worked, but I learned a lot from those. Are probably two big things.
Yeah.
What have you learned about change, about yourself making change?
I like control. I like to control all things everywhere. I say that in seriousness. I think that's the one thing I've learned about myself over the years, and a lesson I continue to learn over and over and over again is we don't really control anything. And when we try to control something is when things really go
haywire,
sideways, in all sorts of ways. And when I say control, I mean it's everything from perfectionism. So we can't do this until it gets perfect, or we have all our T's crossed, I's dotted, whatever that looks like, to I need to be the one that keeps showing up for whatever it is. It shows up in a variety of different ways. And I'm sure throughout the podcast, I will share lessons, even the micro ones, but it's the way I spend my time is how in this moment, what am I trying to control and to what end?
So you ask yourself that question?
On the regular. And then most of the time it's just stop. That's been the biggest
So that's the speech you give yourself then?
Is just stop. Stop whatever it is that you're doing, because you're the one bringing whatever it is to the table, and take a pause. Because look, I can plow through almost anything. That we should probably eliminate that.
Just do like this. Edit.
I can plow through. No, I mean, look, I can power through almost anything. I'm willing to wake up early, stay late, be the one that's at every table, willing to do almost anything. And I've learned to actually surround myself with people who slow me down in a way that is useful. for the end result.
So when you're hiring or socializing, do you look for those kinds of qualities? Do you know enough about yourself to look for those qualities in people when you're selecting friends or colleagues?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I very much know the friend that I can call when it's like, I need you to amp me up even more. So I'm calling so-and-so. And we're getting on this train and we're riding it, right, all the way. Or I probably need a moment to be put in check. And what does this look like? And bringing it back to this podcast, I think about one of the reasons I asked you to do this with me is I think values-wise.
I haven't told you I'm a controller, have I?
Perfect.
No, I'm not a controller.
Usually if someone else is trying to take control, I can sit back. But I think values-wise, we align, but the way in which we approach the work, the information, feels very different.
Say more.
You read the whole article. I'm lucky to get through the first few sentences and then the last paragraph. I'm the person that goes to the end of the book and reads the last page first, kind of thing. And you read through the details. You pay attention to the small things, and I'm valuing the feeling that I get and the gist of things as it goes. And I feel like that brings together it's more of a complete picture. I can do the details, and I'm sure you can do the feel part, but it seems that they're very complementary to a conversation around the human experience in higher education.
Campus Confidential is presented by Compass Group, produced by Corey Inscoe and Jen Fisher, with your hosts, Kelsey Harmon Finn and Loren Rullman.